know about you, but I'm crossing. She's gonna be in this thing right here. You got her? God damn it, I missed. All right, welcome to the Wandering Wingshooter podcast. My name is Ryan Reddick, and I'll be hosting the podcast. I've hunted upland birds in my home state of Oklahoma all my adult life, and over the last 15 years have wandered in pursuit of game birds to Arizona, Colorado, Texas, Kansas, Wyoming, and Michigan. This great country is incredibly majestic, and especially so when viewed from behind a pair of bird dogs. I've met dozens of wonderful people in the uplands, and I hope to introduce you to as many of them as I can through this podcast. Join me as I wander the uplands learning about birds, dogs, and guns. Today I'll be talking with John McGranaghan. John is a New Hampshire grouse and woodcock hunter that is retired to the plains of Oklahoma. We'll discuss wing shooting in New England and how it compares to chasing wild bobwhites on the western plains. The podcast is sponsored by Pike Gear. An upland hunter who hunts hard needs clothing that is light and makes hunting easier, not harder. An upland hunter is always on the move and always thinking about his next move. He needs clothing that can move with him, clothing that doesn't hold him back or weigh him down. Pike Gear is designed for upland hunters who are always on the go and always dreaming about their next hunting trip. Visit pikegear.com to find the best upland hunting clothing you will ever wear. Follow Pike Gear on Facebook and Instagram. And John, how are you this evening?
I'm doing just fine, Ryan. How are you?
I am so good. I'll tell our listeners that we got ready to do the interview, and you said, "Hey, how about a wee dram of Scotch?" And I said, "Yeah, I think so." So we both went and got ourselves a small glass of Scotch to start the evening.
Yes, sir. A fine way to finish off dinner.
So, John, tell me about yourself.
Well, I'm about 63 years old, and related to bird hunting, I spent from a young boy in the woods. I spent a lot of time in the woods, just running in the woods for the pure joy of it, and exploring the haunts of all the critters up in my native New Hampshire, and did all kinds of things related to the outdoors. And of a certain age, I guess about 20 years ago or so, I was reading a magazine, a hunting magazine, and that fellow in that article was talking about the tandem of upland bird hunting and fly fishing, and some of the traditions associated with that, and that caught my attention. I decided that I wanted to hunt some birds. I started out for a little bit with no dog and no gun, and I killed birds with a hard stare.
Oh my gosh. So John, tell me where you were raised. You talk about being in the woods and you talk about New Hampshire, but I mean, where would that be?
Well, I was born and raised in Manchester, New Hampshire, which is a larger city in the state back in the day. And my grandpa, he raised pigeons for upland bird hunters, and he raised rabbit dogs, beagles. And I hunted with him some, never bird hunting though. We hunted deer and rabbits and did a bunch of fishing in the woods. That was my beginning. Then I went on as a young man to other things and got married and had babies and such. And as I alluded to earlier, after a while, 20 years ago or so, I decided to get into upland bird hunting.
Well, and you've been to Beaver, Oklahoma, so you know the big wide open spaces where I live. Offer me comparisons about just how the geography differs where you were raised and where I live.
Yeah, so if you can picture 150 years ago or so, all of southern New England from the Massachusetts border, or southern New Hampshire rather, from the Massachusetts border right on up to the White Mountains or thereabouts, that land was all cleared. All of the forestation was cleared to basically supply the coke factories in England, in Europe, but mainly in England. It was farmed. Stone walls were built as they cleared the fields. They would move those stones that grew out of the ground to the edges of their field, the individual homesteader. That created a system, literally a system of stone walls throughout all of that area of New Hampshire from the White Mountains down. And over time, as industrialization took place, the farmers moved to the cities and so on, and we had what became these overgrown farms and homesteads all over that part of the state.
I mean, like Robert Frost type of stuff.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, the stuff that I began to hunt when I first, I did a bunch of reading and I tried to figure out, where I would find these grouse that I was reading about. And, there's all kinds of books out there, and it's real easy to pick up enough information to at least get, an idea of where you ought to be looking to find those birds. And that was going to be an early successional growth in my part of the world anyway, in old overgrown homesteads and farms. So we would encounter very thick stuff with all kinds of brambles and berries and grapes and different fruit trees, mainly apple trees, and multiflora rose and on. But very, very thick, tough stuff the grouse live in up there. So the contrast is different for man and for the dogs. Where on the prairie, I've discovered you earn your birds with a whole bunch of miles, burning boot leather. Up in the area that I hunted in New Hampshire and Maine and Vermont, you earn it by busting through that real thick brush. Nowhere near as many miles covered in a particular hunt, but you'd earn it because it was tough going. And the same with the dogs.
And around here, I mean, even in my lifetime, and I'm not quite 50 years old, but around here, there's been a fairly substantial transfer of population to the metropolitan areas, Tulsa, Oklahoma City, Amarillo. Is that true in southern New Hampshire as well?
It was at one time, certainly, but that's changed. The towns, it's different. It's different in New England, in northern New England, particularly, is what I'm used to. Is that the towns are almost, it's like a concatenation of communities. There's no big open expanses between the towns. They're just like one on another. So it's really different in that sense. So and again, it's a much smaller area. So the city of Manchester, for instance, is surrounded, 50 miles in either direction by all of this kind of terrain that I'm talking about.
I got you.
So it's just so much closer. So you can be 50 miles away and you can work in the city.
And so people now live on those homesteads again?
Many of them have been reclaimed. You betcha. Yep.
And do many of them have some agricultural use now that maybe they had previously been used for agriculture, then allowed to go to seed, for lack of a better term, and now being opened up again?
Yeah, to some extent. We see that both with livestock and farming.
And how does that affect the hunting?
Nowhere near what it was, but yeah.
How does that affect the hunting?
Well, it can actually be good, because what they're doing is, as the forest has matured in a bunch of areas, they're clearing once again, clearing pockets that and creating edges of successional growth.
Yeah, it's the small stuff, the first trees that come after. Yeah, it's allowed to go back that the grouse like the most.
Yeah, they need that. They need good cover up above to protect them from the raptors. And so when you early successional, I mean, there's different ways of looking at it, but from 10 to 20 years is kind of like prime. When it gets beyond 25 years, it's starting to open up a little bit. There's more space up above, and they don't feel as protected.
Well, and you, it sounds like, got started with upland hunting much the same way I did, although I hunted quail as a kid with my dad, but it was never, it's not like I hunt quail now. And I was a voracious consumer of outdoor literature, and like you, read articles about bird dogs and decided, by God, I wanted to go hunt quail over a pointing dog. And so I did. I had the wherewithal and the access to be able to go do that, and so I did it, and I haven't looked back.
Yeah.
You started much the same way, it sounds like.
Yeah, I sure did. Yeah,
When,
a little bit later. Again, I was about 43 years old or so when I decided to pursue that lifestyle, and it has become a lifestyle.
it's amazing how it consumes you, isn't it?
Yeah, it sure is. I mean, there's so much to it. You know, it comes down to the dogs, though. You know, for me, and you know, this is axiomatic. Most guys will say the same thing. You know, hunting grouse. You know, the grouse population across you know, the whole northern tier has declined. So you know, we don't see as many birds as we used to. But you know, we don't need to. You know, we get out there in the field with the dogs, and it's more quality than quantity. And it's a wonderful thing to be out there on God's earth and to experience what we have. We're so blessed with, and to see those dogs work and do what they do so well.
And I'm fascinated by this because I have other friends that are just like what you're talking about. I mean, they just, at a certain point in their life, they had the financial wherewithal and the time, and something tripped their trigger, and they thought, you know, I want to shoot a bird over a pointing dog. And so they went and got a dog and got a shotgun, and now they're chasing birds all over.
Yeah,
And so it fascinates me about how that process
yeah,
starts and then worms its way into your lifestyle.
yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, I've done a lot of things in the outdoors, as I mentioned earlier. You know, all kinds of things: kayaking and rock and ice climbing, and lots of backpacking, and you know, some crazy stuff. And you know, my body began to feel it, and I'm thinking, you know, I'm not going to lose the connection to the woods and the streams that I love. And I was actively looking for something else to do. And you know, reading the magazine and finding those articles, and then later books, of course. There was a breeder of Labrador retrievers right around the corner from my home in Amherst, New Hampshire, and that lab, Connor, my chocolate lab Connor, was my first dog, and I shot my first grouse over his flush. I'll never forget that morning. This was early successional stuff in reclaimed farmland up just outside of Henniker, New Hampshire, and it was a sunny lane, a morning about 10 o'clock in the morning, the sun shining through, you know, creating that green hue as the sun comes down through the trees, just so. And two grouse went up that Connor had pushed, and two went up and one went down.
Oh,
and
that's so cool.
And we had a joyful time there together.
That's just wonderful.
That set me off. And then after a while, talking to folks that I'd met and so on, and I decided that I wanted to have a pointing dog. You know, reading about the setup, you know, the connection there that can be closer with a pointing dog, the partnership that can be closer and more specific. I grasped that, and I got myself a setter, and I haven't turned back.
There's nothing in the outdoors that I've ever done, and I've done quite a bit out in the outdoors, but there's nothing that creates for me the emotion and the intensity and the excitement of a damn doe pointing dog pointing a wild bird.
Yeah,
I mean, you've seen how I act when it happens.
Yes, I have. Yeah,
I'm obviously excited.
Yeah, you get just a little bit excited. You do.
Oh.
We had some good times, yeah. And it's all about the dogs, you know. I like to say it's in the eyes, you know, to look into the eyes of a dog, you know, at any time, but particularly when he's working, when he's locked up on point, and he'll kind of, you know, you kind of come up alongside. You don't want to walk right behind him, but you walk along one side or another, depending on, you know, what the lay of the land is and where that bird might be, and you catch the look in their eye. There's something special there. There's a communication that goes on.
Yeah,
I can't get enough of that.
Me either. Me either. I absolutely can't, John. And I don't care whether it's in the woods or on the prairies. Uh, as long as the dog will point them and they'll let me shoot at them, I'm going to go do it if I get a chance.
Yes, sir.
So, and I know some quite a few guys from Michigan. They have a wonderful bird hunting tradition up there, and those guys they talk about the rough grouse like he's a god, and he's a fun bird to hunt. I'll give him that. But you mentioned woodcock as well. What's
Yeah.
that like in New England?
Well, I mean, it's great. There's nothing like woodcock to keep a dog busy and to train a pup, because those birds, again, you're in the same real tight type of foliage and stuff, but they will hold tight for a dog like no other bird will. I mean, you can literally. I have just about stepped on one with a dog locked up, and I've got tons of pictures of this where my dog would be locked up on a woodcock, and I'm looking around on the ground, where the heck is that thing, and just about step on one to kick them up.
Yeah.
It's a different kind of a game, but it's really fun, and they fly erratically. You just never know what a woodcock's going to do. They can go straight up in the air. They can go close to the ground. They can zigzag through the trees like you hear about. It's a ton of fun, and they're in years when, or locations even, when grouse are scarce and we're having trouble, getting some action, the woodcock are always there, both local birds and then the flight birds as they're coming through, migrating south. And oftentimes you run into a flight of woodcock, and it's like they're like popcorn popping all over the place. I've caught flights where there would be 30 or 40 birds in the size of a football field, and it gets to be sensory overload at times for the dogs. But boy, is it fun!
Well, and I've got a friend there in Michigan that bans woodcock, and so he goes and finds the chicks. He uses his dogs in the spring to
Yep.
find the chicks, and he puts bands on them, and they do a lot of documentation, probably for their fish and wildlife. And he'll shoot a woodcock, but he won't hardly shoot more than one, maybe two a day. He acts like he doesn't really like shooting them, although
Yeah.
he'll do it if his dog points one.
Yeah.
He loves those birds, loves them.
Yeah, a lot of us feel the same way. There are times when they're a much easier game. When the shooting is pretty easy, it doesn't feel as sportsmanlike.
Yeah.
But for the dog's sake, we'll drop a couple. Seldom will I take a limit of 3 woodcock. But it happens every once in a while. Like maybe there's a young boy around with his dad, and
Yeah.
on one occasion they didn't have a dog, and I had already shot a couple of woodcock, and I asked the dad, and his son there if they'd like to hunt over my dog Tucker, my setter Tucker, and they got all excited, and they did. And that day we took some more birds.
I bet that boy's got a bird dog of his own today, is what I bet.
I believe he does. He was talking to his dad about it when we were finished up that afternoon.
Yeah.
It was pretty cool.
Yeah. And it just seems to me like that woodcock hunting can get to be a real spiritual thing.
Yeah, they're a sweet bird, Ryan. I'll recount one little story real quick here. I mean, like I said, they're very unpredictable. When I first, Tucker is my Llewellyn setter. Now he's going to be 13 years old next month. When he was probably a year old, I believe it was in his first true season, maybe a little bit more than a year old. We were in a cover down along the river in Kentucky, and he pointed this woodcock, and then he started moving over close to it. He hadn't quite figured it out yet, and that woodcock started running and ran around a clump of trees about 4 times with Tucker chasing him around that clump of trees before that bird went up. That's the weirdest thing I've ever seen. I haven't seen it since.
He didn't want to fly.
He didn't want to fly. No.
Yeah. Oh, I've shot some woodcock, and I like them. I enjoy watching the dogs with them. I mean, you see an old pointer and she's just locked up solid as a rock, and that woodcock will be 8 inches off her nose, you know.
Yep.
And they're having a stare down. That woodcock's looking at her, and that pointer will be looking at the woodcock,
Yep.
and they let you walk right up there and kick them in the air and take a little bit of a deep breath and then shoot them.
Yep. It's just like that. Yep.
And pretty birds too. I mean, relatively speaking.
They sure are. Yep. Yeah. So yeah, it's in it, and the feathering. We mentioned the fly fishing a little bit earlier, and it's kind of a circular thing for me with the fly fishing and the bird hunting, where I'll shoot the birds and I'll tie flies with the feathers from the birds that I shoot, and then catch fish. So it's kind of like a spiritual thing. Yeah, it all kind of makes sense.
So other than New England, and I'll just include New England, I mean, where all have you hunted birds?
Well, in New England, mainly New Hampshire and Maine, and not outside, other than Oklahoma now and Missouri.
Okay. And I know you've hunted bobwhite quail in Oklahoma.
Yes, sir.
And before we start talking about bobwhite quail, I'll ask you, the hunting in New Hampshire and Maine, public, private, what's that access look like?
Yeah, it's all public land or paper company land in the big North Country above the White Mountains in northern New Hampshire and in Maine. That paper company where they're lumbering off the big forests, and there's a variety of early successional growing up in that land, and that draws the grouse and the woodcock in there.
Okay.
That's
and
a totally
access?
different. Yeah, access is very easy. There's no problem with access whatsoever. In New Hampshire, if it's not posted, you can hunt it. That goes back to the old laws way back in the Revolutionary days, where hunting was a subsistence thing. So they didn't prevent you from hunting on land that was available.
And are people accepting of bird hunters?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely not as popular as it once was. A lot of folks that are coming into New Hampshire to, they want a postcard gentleman farm kind of thing. They post their property. They're coming up from places like New Jersey and New York and what have you, other places, I suppose, and they buy these properties, and they want that postcard looking kind of a place, and those folks that don't understand the traditions that we've had for so long will post the land, and you honor that. But there's still plenty of access to both public and private land that's not posted.
And the locals, are they generally tolerant of hunting in general?
Oh yeah, sure, yeah. I mean, the world has gone a different way, and there's your anti-gun, anti-hunter type folks, and without getting political and stuff, which does no good for anybody. You see a little bit of that, but honestly, I was never impacted with it, and nobody that I knew that I hunted with was impacted by that sort of thing in that part of the world.
And my take on that is, I don't really need much to enjoy my sport. I need a reasonable chance of success, and I need somewhere to go and actually do it.
Yeah.
And it sounds like that's pretty readily available in New Hampshire and Maine.
Yeah, no question about it. Yeah.
And so if I were to get a wild hare and decide I'm going to fly out to Manchester and take my bird dogs and go hunt grouse, it sounds like that wouldn't be a terribly difficult thing for me to accomplish.
Not at all. Not even without a guide or somebody to point you in the right direction. Just go outside of town, start driving on some old country roads, and you're going to find cover. Just look for what you know to look for, where birds will likely want to hang out. And as long as you don't see posted signs, and you just walk out in there and hunt. There's a network all over northern New England of what we call old Class 6 roads. They're gravel dirt roads, and some are only passable with a serious Jeep or 4-wheel drive vehicle. These were the old roads that went to these homesteads that are largely out in the woods now. And you go out there in the country, and you're going to find a series of these roads, and just drive around on a few of them. You're going to find territory to hunt birds in.
You and I are going to do that, John.
What's that?
You and I are going to do that. We're going to load our bird dogs up, and we're going to go to New Hampshire or Maine or both, and we're going to go, by God, see some Robert Frost country.
That sounds like a bold plan, and I heartily endorse it.
There we go. What about dog breeds out there? You've talked about labs, and I know you're a setter guy, and God, they are a beautiful dog.
Well, we've got all the dogs. We've got folks that are adherents of all of them. Lots of pointers, some good pointer breeders and Brittany breeders and setter breeders and Cocker Spaniels and Springers, and we've got them all. They all work. They all do the trick.
Setters just do it better, right?
I'm going to stay away from that one.
I'm a pointer guy.
Yeah. Well, it's like I've said before, they're all great dogs. It's just that setters are a little bit greater.
There you go. Yeah, and that Max of yours is beautiful. Oh, he's beautiful.
Thank you. I'm looking forward to this season. He just turned a year a few weeks ago, and boy, he's got some run in him. He's got some point in him. I'm looking forward to getting him out there again.
Oh, we'll do it. We'll take him, put him on some birds, and he'll have some fun.
Yes, sir. I'm so looking forward to that. It's a long hot summer out here.
Tell people what happened last year. You came out and went quail hunting.
Yes, sir. I did. And I'll tell you what, the prairie, it's a beautiful thing. It's different than what I'm used to. It took me a little bit of adjustment to the terrain and the amount of territory that needs to be walked to find our birds and stuff. Well, that wasn't always the case. Sometimes we'd find birds right away, just like back home. But I really began to appreciate the prairie and the bobwhite and how he lives and how difficult it is for him to make it out there, just like it is for our grouse. And walking with you, actually, you like to talk and you like to share your knowledge and experience gained over the years. And I felt like a sponge. I was just kind of sucking it up, learning everything I could because, again, it's so new to me. The commonality is the dogs. The dogs are the same, but the bird is different, the terrain is different, and how to cover it and what to look for. It's a whole new learning experience, and to me, that's real exciting. And I appreciated what you were sharing with me. I'm not trying to blow you up like a balloon or nothing like that.
No, I understand, John.
But having somebody that would, behave like a mentor and answer my stupid questions and just be as patient as you have been, that's pretty special. And that's what it's all about. We want to share what we love.
Absolutely.
With other folks that feel the same way. And that camaraderie was there right from the get-go. I sure appreciate it.
Well, I've never met a fellow hunter I didn't really like. Yeah, I'm gonna take that back. I know some people that are hard on their dogs and hard on their women, and I don't like those people. But for the most part, the men and women that I have hunted with have been great folks.
Yeah,
and
I've shared that experience. I agree.
And I think I told you this. I don't know that I did, but you were one of 24 last year. So I hunted with 24 different companions over the course of the Oklahoma quail season last year, and you were one of 24.
Wow. I had no idea that you hosted that many. That's fantastic.
Yeah, a lot of fun. I got to meet a lot of really neat people.
Yeah. Yeah, and that one time I got to meet a couple of them as well from a couple of the Michigan boys, and that was interesting. I've always wanted to hunt Michigan, Wisconsin, and Minnesota, and I believe I might get to do that here in the next couple of years.
Well, don't let those Michigan boys ruin it for you.
Yeah, I'll try not to. I think I got a handle on them up there.
And we hunted with one BB Beauchamp, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we sure did. Yeah.
And then Carmody with his peach shirt, right?
That's right. Yeah,
that's right.
We had a good time. Yeah, You know what? That one day, we climbed a bunch of fences, didn't we?
Yeah, we did. Yeah, we did. And so Max was a pup, Max was like 6 months old, right?
Yeah, 5 and 6 months old. That's right. Yeah.
And he got to stick his nose in a quail. Did he ever point a bird?
Oh yeah, yeah. On a couple of occasions, and he hunted dead as well.
There you go. There you
Yeah,
go. I mean, that's just great.
yeah, yeah. Oh man, I couldn't have been more pleased. We took some pictures there to bear witness that it actually happened. I could not have been more pleased with that young pup like he was.
Well, and how did that compare? I mean, you've talked about the fact that by comparison, there's a lot of commonalities, but to a weekend hunt in New Hampshire, how did it compare?
Well, I mean, again, to me, the dogs are the common thread that runs through them. The differences that were most notable to me is the terrain. So in the Northwoods, particularly in the Northeast, where it's very, very thick, it's not like big poplar stands, it's just real thick with all kinds of different brambles and stuff. It's you don't always see the dog. You don't always know where they are unless you're listening to the bell or you're looking at your GPS. And even then, sometimes it's difficult. You can have a dog that's 20 yards away and you can't hear him or see him. You can be 10 yards away and still not see him. But out on the prairie, you can see that dog off. Man, how far away were we sometimes? A mile?
Oh, yeah, easy.
And you can still see that running dot on the landscape. And then you can tell.
I was going to say, my dot was 20 yards from us maybe twice that day. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, dot was way out there. Yeah. But the thing is you can, if the terrain is flowing, that allows for it, you can see them and watch their attitude, even when they're way the heck out there, a half mile or a mile. I mean, I'm just throwing out those distances, not really being able to judge, like you could, how far it is, but it seemed like that far to me.
Well, and I'll tell you, my dogs will hunt at a quarter of a mile. Yeah. A quarter of a mile pretty consistently. Dottie will occasionally maybe stretch out a little farther than that. Ellie really doesn't want to get more than 500 yards from me, but Dottie's not as shy about distance as Ellie is.
Yeah.
But that's still a long dang ways for a dog to be out there.
It's a long way. And my point is that you can still tell that far away by the attitude of the dog when they're getting birdie and something's going on.
That's right.
So the connection between the hunter and the dog is still there, even though it's way far out there. That was one of the things that I noticed out there on the prairie. And then, a dog, when it knows what he's doing, is going to hold those birds. And sometimes you got to walk quite a ways to get there. That's a big difference with grouse hunting.
A staunch dog is really, really important.
Yeah.
Oh, and that's the thing that I get from a lot of hunters that come from the east is just the size, just the sheer size of the cover. And by cover, I mean just the properties that we hunt. And that's always fascinates people when they come out here for the first time, how big it is.
Yeah. I found it almost dizzying, the exposure to the vast distances that your eyes are taking in. And I fell in love with that. It's a very cool thing.
Those views up there on the Cimarron are just priceless, aren't they?
Oh man, it sure was. Yeah.
When people talk about the beautiful places in the world, they don't talk about the Panhandle of Oklahoma. But I could show you some places that are pretty damn beautiful.
Yeah, and you did, yeah.
And beauty's in the eye of the beholder, obviously. But to me, I've been all over the central United States hunting birds, and that country up there on the Cimarron, on the Kansas border that we hunted last fall, that's as pretty a country as you'll see anywhere.
Yeah, the different colors and the hues, particularly as the sun is going down, those reds and oranges and yellows, and then the wind flowing across the grass. It's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, it makes you feel free, doesn't it?
It does, yeah.
In a way that it's hard to explain, but it gives you a sense of freedom At least it does me. It gives me a sense of freedom that is addictive.
Yes, sir. Yeah, I agree.
And we hunted private land when you hunted with. No, we hunted some public stuff too, didn't we?
Yeah, the one day we hunted public, and that other day there we hunted that private stuff way out there, and yeah, we found birds both days.
Yeah.
Yeah, we sure did.
Oh, Oklahoma has a wonderful public land system. I mean, it's not as extensive as some of the other western states, but with their OLAP program, they're really trying to kind of keep access available to most people.
Well, coming from a state, that could fit in the panhandle of Oklahoma, I thought the area open to the public there was just vast. To me, it was incredible.
Yeah, 27,000 acres on the Beaver River WMA.
Yeah, it really,
which is more than a man can hunt in several years.
Yeah, right.
I've seen most of it, but I haven't seen it all, I don't think.
Yeah, man would wear out several pair of boots before he covered half of it.
Yeah, and I've been, and you know this to be true. I'm kind of a big advocate for the public land out here, and I love to share what we have.
Yes, yeah, you sure do.
Yeah, I mean the people in this little community are extremely important to me for all the obvious reasons. I mean, part based upon what I do, but also, I mean, those are my people.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Yeah.
And that waitress at the cafe, and the man that runs the hotel, and the lady working behind the counter at the convenience store, those are all people I know by name. I know their kids, I know their parents, I know their grandparents oftentimes. Those are my folks.
That's pretty special, Ryan.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll tell a quick story about that motel. The first night that I spent out there, I went out.
Was it the Hillcrest?
Yeah, that Hillcrest. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm just dumb old Yankee from New Hampshire out there. First time out there chasing the quail, and I spent a night at that Hillcrest, well, a couple of nights. But the first night, the next morning, the owner, and his name's escaping me now, and I forget.
Melvin.
Yeah, Melvin. He sent a gal out there with donuts and other breakfast pastries, and went door to door at the motel handing that stuff out. And boy, was that welcome.
And you were like, "What? Who's giving this to me?"
It was pretty cool. I felt very special, very welcome there.
That's pretty neat. So, and I mean, relatively speaking, one of the things I see out here is that a lot of folks that aren't tied to the hunting or to the land itself don't recognize the economic value of that public land. Folks don't realize how many individuals, just like yourself, it brings into our community.
Yeah, I suppose that I would think that they would recognize that.
They really don't. You'd be amazed at I mean, the waitresses know if you show up wearing blaze orange, of course you're a hunter, and they recognize the importance of that. Melvin, of course, obviously, he's handing out donuts. He recognizes the value of it, but a lot of people in the community don't.
Oh, yeah.
And I think I talked with you about this. There's a real lack of bird hunters out here. I mean, there's not a lot of local bird hunters.
I remember you talking about how things have changed in your lifetime related to the folks that own that land and are working the land. That the younger folks, just really weren't interested in continuing to work the land and have done other things or moved off. And then there's these large tracts of land that are just sitting there vacant. And didn't you say that some of those folks were giving that land over to the state to become public land?
No, I mean, there's the McFarland unit of the Beaver River WMA was sold by, some kids my age, some people that grew up here, and their folks passed away. And instead of running that ranch, and it was a pretty good sized concern, probably 8,000 acres, give or take, and instead of running that ranch, they just sold it to the state of Oklahoma, and it's now part of the public land that's available.
Okay, that's what it was. Yeah.
And it's been a boon for us out here. It's the best quail habitat on the place. But, I'm one of the few kids, and I use that term really, really, really loosely, that have returned back to the community. I mean, I couldn't name a handful of people that are my age that have gone off, gotten educated, and came back. It just doesn't happen.
Yeah, it's kind of a shame, isn't it?
Yeah, and the average age is in the upper 60s in the county. So our community is really aged, and what that means is that, I mean, I go out on the wildlife department, and you're talking 27,000 acres. It's a big old chunk of ground. On a Saturday morning in, for example, January, and I'm the only guy out there. I mean, there may be one or two other vehicles on the place, but it is not unusual for me to hunt a whole day out there and not see another hunter.
Yeah. So in the latter part of the season in January or into February, the out-of-staters aren't around so much, and the folks like me that are 6 hours away from that area just are kind of done for the season, and it leaves to you. Is that kind of what you're saying, man?
To a certain extent, I mean, it's absolutely true that people, when they think of public property, I think a lot of times think, oh, it's just getting hammered. It's getting overran by hunters, and after the first couple of weeks, your odds are slim to none to find a covey of quail, and that is absolutely not true. It's just absolutely not true.
Well, you would know. Yeah.
Yeah, I would know, wouldn't I? So that brings me to bird hunters. I love bird hunters. Have you noticed that about me?
I've noticed that. Yeah. I'm kind of partial to bird hunters too. We're a pretty good lot.
Yeah. I find that bird hunters in general are gregarious people. They like folks.
Yeah.
They like dogs better than they like people, but they like folks nonetheless.
As long as those people like dogs, and that all works. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, they're private. Bird hunters are private about some things, access mainly.
Yeah.
But open about a lot of other things. You and I met through a bulletin board, I think, didn't we?
Yeah, we sure did. Yeah.
I mean, that's how I've met a lot of the bird hunters that I know, is through bulletin boards like the Upland Journal, and there's an Oklahoma Hunting Forum and some other places where I meet people.
Yeah. Yeah, and it was the same for me. Even I guess it probably took 5 years into my bird hunting career before I discovered the forums. But most of the folks that I've hunted with back home were folks that I'd met initially on the forums. No question about it. It was, just a way to bring the community together where you otherwise wouldn't. You might bump into each other out in the woods somewhere, but. Yeah, that means a lot. I think it means a lot to all of us, all across the country. We can meet folks from one end of the country to another online, and then hook up in real life and have a good time. Having already shared something, some ideas, and so on. And yeah, it's a big part of it.
It really is, and it's a wonderful community.
Yep. Yeah, it sure is.
I think how we met was, you probably sent me a personal message saying, "Hey, I'm going to be hunting. I want to hunt quail in Oklahoma. How do I go about doing that?" Yeah,
that's exactly what it was. I came out here not knowing a thing, and just knowing I wanted to get my dogs on birds, and I started putting out little queries out there. Anybody that looked like they were in Oklahoma or close by, and I just started sending out messages and. Hey, let's get together. I sure would like to learn. And that's what happened. I've met a few good folks out here in the short time, 2 years that I've been out here. And every single one has been willing to share something.
That's good. Yeah, people ought to be more gracious in this world.
Yep.
If I were to tell you, John, that you're not the only person I've met that way.
I believe you. That doesn't surprise me at all. Yeah. Yeah.
And I mean, there's some downside to that bulletin board system. I think, we've all seen it. If somebody goes on and says, "Oh my God, look, the birds are thick here this year," then hunters sometimes descend like locusts and ruin a good thing for you.
Yeah, we saw that, even back home in New Hampshire, in the North Country when, birds were, we were having a pretty good time on them. And there was an article that was written in a magazine about a specific spot. And as a result of that magazine, folks came from everywhere. And it got to be where it was hard sometimes to find a parking spot way up in the big woods.
I'll be doggone.
So, yeah, I mean, it does happen. It ebbs and flows like that. But you know what? There's more positive than there is negative, in my opinion.
I agree.
There's a fella, I'm not sure I should mention his name in the context of the podcast here, but he's a veterinarian for the state of Oklahoma. And I met him online on that one forum that you mentioned, Oklahoma hunting.net, I think is what it's called. And there's a whole lot of bird hunters on there. And I had mentioned that I had my Tucker Llewellyn setter. Well, he happens to be also a breeder of Llewellyn setters. And a real quick story here that to me is just a real indication of what can happen out here is Zeke had a litter, and he had this one puppy that he wanted to hang on to, and he found out that his wife was pregnant, and they were told 10 years ago that they could never have a baby.
Oh my goodness. How wonderful.
She got pregnant, and he knew that I was looking for another Lou, with Tucker getting on in years and stuff. And he gave me a call and said, "Look, I've got this puppy. This is the story, and I'd like for you to have him." And that's how I got Max.
I'll be doggone.
Yeah, isn't that something? So.
Oh, and he's such a beautiful dog.
Yeah, we love him to death. Yep.
Yeah, it's amazing. I think in today's world, it's harder to make friends. Because we have a tendency to avoid that personal contact, and those bulletin boards override that at times.
Yeah, but it allows for, like we were talking about, it allows for making the actual personal connection.
It does.
And I've got quite a number of friends that were started just that way.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, folks that I love dearly. And yeah, it's it's like I don't know. I used to think of it kind of like having pen pals that you could eventually meet up with.
Mm-hmm. And it gives you a sense, although a very limited sense, about people on the front side. And then when you meet them, you fill in those blank spaces.
Yeah, you betcha. Just like that.
Yeah.
But if you're paying attention, you get a pretty good idea of who it is that you're talking to.
That's right. Over time.
Over time, yeah. You
right.
Get it. But there is this thing I call internet schizophrenia. Where I'm sorry.
Oh, you give it to me. Both barrels.
Some folks, and they're few and far between, will act a way online that they wouldn't act in front of you.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's that. But that's human nature. It's
That'll get you punched in the nose in Oklahoma.
Yeah, I think a lot of folks have had a thought like that a time or two.
So I cannot remember, John. Did I show you any blue quail?
We saw one. Yeah.
Shot one?
Yeah.
Just saw one covey.
We saw one covey. And then when we were cleaning those birds, you had some that had already been shot at a prior time. And we cleaned one out of that one bunch back there behind your house.
Ah, okay.
But I don't believe oh, wait a minute. You know what? I think we did shoot one.
I was going to say, I normally clean my take at the end of the day. And
I think we did. Yeah.
So there was one killed that day.
Yeah, one blue quail. Yeah.
Which means that I showed you a covey somewhere.
Yes. And I got a feeling I know where that was.
I bet I do too.
Yeah.
So that's got to be on your bucket list now, doesn't it?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, it has got to be shooting one. Has got to be something we need to do.
Yes, sir. That would be wonderful.
I guess maybe that's next year, right?
I'm kind of thinking next year is this year now.
Or this year? Yeah, it sure is.
Yeah. The season's just around the corner. Boy, time sure flies.
Yeah, it does. What was it? What else was I going to ask you about? Guns. Yeah, let's talk about guns a little bit.
All right. That's going to be difficult.
Yeah, come on, tell me about guns.
Yeah,
What's your gun
guns.
of choice?
I hate guns.
Yeah, no, you
I don't
don't.
talk about guns. Yeah, man, we love our shotguns, don't we?
Yeah, yeah. I know you carry a side by side.
Yes, sir. Yep.
And why?
Why?
Yes.
Well, I guess to be honest, I carry them all from time to time, even a semi-auto.
A ray gun.
But yeah, a ray gun. Yeah. But part of it is just the tradition. The stuff that I'd read about in books and magazines over the years. The idea and the tradition of it just got a hold of me. It feels good, especially a side by side, to be hefting a side by side between my hands. It's also real nice in that when you're with other folks, it's so easy just to crack that thing open and everybody knows that you're safe. There's just a lot of things about it. I just love them. I prefer a side by side.
And I'm the same way. I mean, for all the reasons you stated, it's easy for people around you to know when it's safe, and it handles the way a shotgun ought to handle in the field.
Yeah.
I love the way it looks, the lines. It's pleasing to me from a visual standpoint.
Yeah.
Weight wise, I don't know if it's any lighter. Some of these modern auto loaders are light guns, so I don't know that you can really say anymore that a side by side is any lighter, but they're not unpleasant to carry.
Yeah.
And
they just, like you say, it's just the way they just come up. It just seems so natural to me. I hear guys say, and I can't argue the point, but I hear guys say that they shoot a semi or an over under better because of it having a single sight plane.
Yeah,
but that's never been an issue for me. I don't really think about the sight plane. I just sort of point at the bird, and then things happen. So that's never been an issue for me. If anything, I have an eye dominance issue where I shoot off the right shoulder and I have a strongly dominant left eye.
That explains a lot.
Yeah. My wife would probably add to that. But if anything, the two barrels, that big old chunk out there, will tend to, at times when my brain can't decide on whether it wants to focus on one eye or the other, having that side by side, I think, tends to pull that left eye over, or pull it over into my right eye, which is where I should be. But most of the time, it really doesn't matter. If I'm not thinking about looking at that barrel, I'm thinking about looking at the bird, then it's really inconsequential to me.
That's right. And you got to look at the bird.
Yeah.
I mean, that's not, well, to each his own. I'm no shooting instructor. I've shot some birds in the field. That would be my only qualification.
Yeah, you sure have. Yeah. Well, I took a lesson one time, and it messed me up for 2 years.
I bet that's right. I've read some books, and I got to tell you that it took me a season or two to get over what I'd read.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. The same thing happened. I took a golf lesson one time, And, it used to be I was kind of a natural. I just hit them straight right down the fairway without thinking about it. I didn't know what I was doing. I just swung the club and the ball went down the fairway. And then I had a semi-pro friend of mine tell me I needed to take a lesson. My swing was all messed up. Well, I took a lesson. Right after that, I couldn't hit the ball for anything.
Oh, we dug off. That's yeah, and I think I told you this before, but to me, shooting a shotgun, at least on birds, is like shooting a basketball. You're either good at it or you're not.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, I did hear some advice the other day that I thought was compelling. In fact, it was on another podcast. A guy was talking about taking some lessons up at Field Sport in Michigan, and he said the advice of his instructor was to take your natural lead and double it, then you'll kill more birds. He swore up and down that it worked great, and I gotta tell you, most of the time when I miss birds, I'm behind them.
Yeah, that's probably true. Yeah,
when you start thinking about that, take your lead and lead it some more.
Yeah, I think that to me what comes into play there is stopping the swing.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's the same for a whole lot of us. It's either we're not being faithful to a tight wood to wood, another head to the stock, or we stop the swing.
Yeah.
Whether it's because we look at the barrels or whatever it is.
Well, and as I've gotten older and shoot more birds, I have transitioned into a purely instinctive shooter.
Yeah.
So I don't think about lead, and when I do, I miss more often than not.
Yeah. And yeah, exactly. Yeah.
When I was younger, I would shoot what would arguably be defined as a sustained lead method, and so I would have to find that sweet spot where I was out ahead of the bird, aiming, for lack of a better term, but to be successful. Now I mean I never even know the gun's there, and the bird falls down. So
we share that for sure. Yeah,
and not always, but often enough that it makes it fun.
Yeah, it's and when you do miss, when you have that big miss, you know why you did.
That's right. That's right. And I think shooting, and I think wing shooting is bad eyesight. That you got to work hard at seeing the bird, and the better you see the bird on the wing, the better shot you're going to be.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, that hard stare they talk about. It's the same thing if you're swinging a bat at a baseball or throwing a dart at a board. You have to be able to see a hard stare. At least that's the way it translates to me. So if I'm looking, like, instead of staring at the bird, or some folks will talk about looking at the beak of the bird. If I'm just looking at the general area of where the bird is, then that's a much bigger area that my eyes are following. And when I pull the trigger, it's going to be somewhere within that larger area rather than, in the vicinity of a tighter area where that bird is.
Yeah,
Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, John, I guess the last area of inquiry I'll make of you is my Balvenie is just about gone. So when I go to the liquor store later in the week, what Scotch do I need to buy?
Well, I would say my two favorites are Laphroaig, Laphroig.
Okay.
Laphroaig.
Mm-hmm.
And get the quarter cask.
Okay.
It's not the most expensive one that they offer, but to me, it's just delicious. Real smoky and peaty. It's just wonderful. And if they don't have Laphroaig, then Lagavulin, the 16-year-old Lagavulin, is a good.
I've seen that on the shelf before too.
Yeah.
And that is guaranteed to make me a better bird hunter?
Well, it might make you imagine that you're a better bird, huh? And you will have a better tradition.
That makes me smile. Well, I'll buy a bottle of one of those too and give it a try and see how it goes.
Make sure you've got one when I come out there to visit you.
Okay. Otherwise, you won't hang out with me, right?
No, I'll still hang out with you.
Really? Even if
Yeah.
I'm drinking cheap whiskey?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Sure. Yeah. Remember, it's about the dogs and the birds.
I got you. Well, John, I so appreciate the time that you've spent with me tonight. It's been fascinating talking with you about New England. I look forward to spending time with you this fall.
I'm honored that you asked me, Ryan. I sure appreciate it.
All right. Well, have a nice evening.
Yeah, you too. I look forward to getting together with you again.
Where's Ellie? She's on point due south of me, 25 yards, so a little farther back. No, she's right here, right in front of you, too. And she's sure. Yeah. Whoa. Better get on him, dogs.